not all stadiums are created equal.
I know that the New York field at MetLife, that's one of them, which is the worst field on the planet.
We're taking a look at the 10 fields that NFL players hate to play on the most and why. First up, we have an oldie but a goodie, and one that very well might not be around for all that much longer. Talking about Soldier Field in Chicago. The playing surface, like the organization itself, is run in a very legacy way. In fact, the grass is actually managed by the Chicago Park District alongside ASM Global, and in many ways, it looks obvious that it's maintained by a municipality. It has been highly criticized over the years by players, coaches, and fans, both opposing and within the Bears organization. Of course, it's not done any favor by its city's climate, as Chicago in the winter isn't exactly primed for facilitating any sort of agricultural growth. Though it's still a big talking point. The hatred for Soldier Field dates all the way back as far as 2012, when one of the Bears' own players spoke out about the surface. This year, our field has been really bad. It's been tore up. There have actually been some places on the field where some portions of it have actually sunk to a new low level, and the other spots are high. Now, he did ultimately apologize, likely under pressure from the management, but this issue has undoubtedly persisted. Think about last year, ahead of Chicago's preseason matchup with the Chiefs, when the field was visibly a wreck. There were brown, dry spots all over and divots all over the place like the fairway at a public golf course. Chiefs coach Andy Reid went as far as to compare it to his high school field from way back when.
Did you get worried about the field condition at all, or it wasn't a factor?
No. A lot better than my high school field was.
Not
much.
Speaking of stadiums that have built quite a reputation for themselves over the years, how about two from the NFC East, FedEx Field and MetLife Stadium? Starting with the former, FedEx Field. For starters, the field was responsible for ending the most exciting period in recent Washington football history, the RG3 era, as it absolutely butchered his knee. And the former dual-threat Pro Bowler is certainly not the only player to ever have serious injuries arise from playing on what is widely considered to be one of the worst surfaces in the league. Look, no one is safe when it comes to playing on FedEx Field. Not to mention the fact that the bleachers around it are literally falling apart. Remember when they all came crashing down at the feet of Jalen Hurts? Yeah, it's tough to get much worse than that. MetLife Stadium, the home of the Giants, as well as the New York Jets, has also found itself under the microscope from players, coaches, and fans for its unsafe reputation. Check out what Eric Armstead said after the 49ers lost multiple players to injuries at MetLife back in 2020.
We felt the turf was pretty thick and guys seemed to be getting stuck in the ground more than regularly, and two of our bunch of our players went down, and just wasn't real fun to be a part of and see that happen to your teammates, and but we had to keep playing and respond, and happy that we were able to get the win.
San Francisco's head coach Kyle Shanahan echoed a similar sentiment during his post-game comments.
That's as many knee injuries and ankle stuff and people getting caught on a turf as I've ever been a part of. From what I saw, the other team did too. I know our players talked about it the entire game, just how sticky the turf was, and I think that was the first time people played on it, I think. But yeah, it was something our guys were concerned about right away, and the results definitely made that a lot stronger. And unfortunately, it's a place we got to go back to next week.
Yeah, that's not exactly what you'd expect, or frankly want to hear about a playing surface for an NFL game. And this wasn't a home field advantage either, because the Jets were having tons of players go down too. MetLife always had a bit of a reputation for being less than ideal to play on, but this game really put it on the map in a bad way, and on a lot of players' hate lists. Honestly, though it's kind of for different reasons, you can tack on a third NFC East team's field. That's right, Lincoln Financial Field, the home of the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, there are the obvious dangers of playing in front of the Philadelphia fan base, which has a bit of a reputation for verbally and even, at times, physically harassing players, both opposing and their own. But the playing surface itself is questionable at best. It uses a reinforced natural grass surface called DD Grassmaster that features artificial fibers to sort of stabilize both the roots and blades of the grass. But that does not stop the field from really getting beaten down, both during Eagles home games and by its other occupants, like the Temple Owls football team, as well as summer concerts and all that jazz. While it being a form of natural grass rather than turf helps, the conditions of the field have resulted in quite a few complaints over the years. Speaking of the NFL players' extreme dislike for turf fields, which is justified by the data, as there are statistically significantly more injuries sustained on turf than grass, there are 3 stadiums in particular that come to mind: US Bank Stadium, Paycor Stadium, and MercedesBenz Stadium. In fact, these 3 stadiums averaged the most injuries per game between 2017 and 2020 in a study done by Sharp Football Analysis. So, I suppose it shouldn't be a huge surprise that players don't love playing on these surfaces. Let's go in the aforementioned order, starting with US Bank Stadium, home of the Minnesota Vikings, which under Sharp Football Analysis report was flagged as the most dangerous surface in the entire league, with 5.9 injuries per game that result in 5.1 exits from the field. Meaning, almost every time an injury occurs, it is significant enough that the player needs to leave the action. For reference, the average number of injuries per game across the turf fields in general during that stretch was just 4.3. Almost a full injury less than what we saw at US Bank Stadium. Maybe that's why you don't see free agents flocking to the Gopher State. Next up, we have Paycor Stadium, which was actually still Paul Brown Stadium during the time period that this study was conducted. It was second on the list with a slightly higher number of injuries recorded at 6.1, but a lower count of exits with 5.0 flat. The issue with the kind of synthetic turf that Cincinnati plays on too is that it's not just the single freak injuries that you have to be concerned about, but rather the constant pounding from playing there over and over, almost like a long-distance runner would feel about making their treks on a hard surface like concrete. Just ask all the offensive linemen who continue to go down with injuries year after year. Then, of course, there is Mercedes-Benz Stadium, down in Atlanta, which at face value is one of the better facilities as a whole around the league. It opened back in 2017 and is considered to be state-of-the-art, pretty much across the board, both from a fan and player amenity perspective. The fan experience is just top-notch. The construction is brand new, the stadium is domed, but where the problem arises is that damned playing surface, which, like the last 2 fields we talked about, is turf. In this case, field turf core, which they plan to replace approximately every 2 seasons. But even with one of the leaders in synthetic grass market laying and relaying their field, the reality is that players still hate to go to work there. Lumen Field, home of the Seattle Seahawks, is an outdoor stadium that has also implemented a field turf playing surface called Field Turf Revolution 360 that the players are none too fond of. It isn't just visiting players here that have had issues either. This was a big topic of discussion back in 2019 when several of their players went down with injuries. Beyond the serious concerns about injuries that'll put you on the IR, playing on this surface also causes players to sustain more skin injuries. No one likes to get turf burn. And of course, let's not forget this is also still the home of the 12th man, aka Seattle's extremely, let's say, enthusiastic crowd. Which, kinda like the aforementioned Link, is known for being incredibly hostile to the players, which adds a whole other element to the dangers of playing there, and only deepens the widespread hate that the league stars have for competing at Lumen Field. Interestingly, at Empower Field at Mile High, where the Denver Broncos play their home games, ownership has actually stepped up and listened to the players. And they replaced their artificial turf with Kentucky bluegrass back in 2015. But that doesn't mean that players are all pumped and giddy to go play a game there. As its name might indicate, Empower Field at Mile High has quite the elevation, as the city it was built in is approximately a full mile above sea level. Competing at altitude, especially for players that aren't well adapted to it, is a huge challenge and can pose some serious health risks. It isn't uncommon to see opposing and, even at times, Broncos players off on the sidelines during a game taking in oxygen. The Broncos fans are also one of the most ravenous around the league, which in combination with the altitude can create a serious home field advantage, and an environment that players from other teams around the league hate to waltz into on any given Sunday. Last but not least, we have one that has likely been on everyone's mind throughout this video: the field at State Farm Stadium. where last year's Super Bowl between the Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles was played. Well, the game itself was a real barn burner, finishing with a 38-35 Chiefs victory. One of the biggest stories to emerge in the aftermath wasn't anything to do with the play on the field, but rather the field itself. It was highly criticized by both teams, even the victors. And naturally, the Eagles players, who seemed to be slipping all over the field the entire game, were even more incensed. Eagles edge rusher Hassan Reddick absolutely went off about the field after the game, telling reporters, "I'm not gonna lie, it was the worst field that I've ever played on. It was very disappointing. It's the NFL. You would think it would be better so we could get some better play, but it is what it is." I don't know, maybe the league will look at it and tell Arizona they gotta step their stuff up. I don't know. It's not my decision to make. It's not my call to make, whatever it is and what it is. I would be shocked if the league doesn't step in and make sure that Arizona finds a way to clean up its act next year, because this was a huge embarrassment for the organization and the league on its grandest stage. But which NFL field do you think NFL players hate the most? Was there anyone that we missed? Let us know in the comment section below. If you like this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. And hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you guys next time.